Hello everyone, I'm Kim and welcome to my sewing room. I hope you're all really well and are having a fabulous day. So welcome back to my pattern matching series. If you haven't seen my first video, definitely go and check it out because it will give you a real visual of what I hope to show you throughout this series that I'm running, and it will cover things like pattern matching, fabric alignment, and also fussy cutting fabric to get a desired look. Pattern matching and fabric alignment and all the other associated techniques that fall under this same umbrella is quite a big subject. So what I'm going to do is occasionally I'm going to break away from the series and just show you things that I've made during my sewing week, and then I will come back to this series and carry on with it until it comes to a natural end. So before we get into the nitty gritty of pattern matching and all those lovely things that I hope to show you, I just want to say that I am not an expert in this area. I'm sure there are lots of other sewists out there that do it a lot better than I do. And for me, this is a relatively new area. I only really started to get into pattern matching through the pandemic because I was unable to work. So I had quite a bit of time on my hands, and my son had just left home. So he had left me this wonderful room to make into my sewing room. So it meant I had a dedicated space and lots of extra time, so it meant I could come in here and play with fabric. So it slowed me down and I started to experiment with things I wouldn't have normally have bothered about, and I came across pattern matching and I had a few goes at it, and some of it was great and some of it was a disaster. But when I did get it right, it really elevated my garments and I persevered with it. And I've become hooked. So anytime I get the opportunity and when the fabric allows, I pattern match. And you can see from the garments I showed you in my first video that I have been doing quite a lot of pattern matching and fabric alignment over the last couple of years. And I'm hoping that this series will encourage and inspire you to have a go yourself. So I thought, how am I going to actually present it in a way that it will do that and also tick the two goals that I set myself this year, which is to get better fitting garments and to use up fabric in my fabric stash. So I looked at all of your comments and quite a few of you liked the shirt sew along that I did and said that would I make more sew alongs. So this is what I have decided to do, is that I am going to incorporate my pattern matching techniques into sew alongs. So I'm going to take you on different journeys, making up various garments where I will incorporate these techniques. And if you want, you can join me on that journey and hopefully get a elevated garment at the end of it, and you can master the skill of pattern matching on the way. So the pattern I picked for our first sew along is Simplicity 8601. Now this is a very simple top, and the nice thing about it, it has a number of centre seams on it, which will give us more than one opportunity to use pattern matching. And for me personally, I have made this before. So I've got the top on here that I first made, and it's not a perfect fit, so I really want to revisit the pattern and adjust it. Right, so this is version C of 8601, and it's very simple. It has a two-piece front with a centre seam. That centre seam works down until it's split, so it splits down at the bottom. And if you wanted to, you could tie the bottom of it into a tie to match the same effect as the sleeves, but I like it to just lay straight down. The back is also a two-piece back with a back opening. There we are. And the sleeves are also two-piece sleeves that come into these lovely ties. Now, The only adjustments I want to make on this top are very simple. They're just to lengthen the bodice and the sleeves. Simplicity draft their patterns for a height of 5'5" to 5'6", and I'm 5'7". So straight away I've lost between 1 inch and 2 inches from the bodice and possibly the sleeves. So I'm just going to extend those to get a better fit for me in my new garment. The other thing I want to also change is the position of this stitch line here, because it was originally up here, but I've hand sewed it closed because it was way too high originally, and on the pattern I just need to actually move that down to a better position so it does not show off my tummy. When I wear this at the moment, I'm very conscious of the fact that this is just a little too high for me, and normally I wear a slip, but today I haven't. But you can just about see, you know, as you move around, there's a little bit of tummy peeping through. I don't want that. I don't like that. So what I've done is on my pattern piece, so my front pattern piece, which I normally trace, I have put the notch where it is on the pattern originally. So if I place this up against me, I've got my seam allowance at the top, the pattern piece then runs down, I've extended it by 1 inch here, which I wanted to do. The waistline marking here actually sits where my waist is, so that's worked out perfectly. But the actual notch mark or tailor's tap mark is here. So this is actually about here where it is at the moment, and I don't like it. So what I'm going to do is I am actually just going to move that down a bit more, because I'm going to wear this blouse flat. I won't be tying it up, so that works better for me. So I've extended both the front and the back by 1 inch, and the sleeves, the two-piece sleeve, I've also extended by 2 inches. So they are the only adjustments that I have made to this pattern for myself. Now I will say before we move on that obviously I have made this top before, so those adjustments are personal to me. So if you haven't made this top before, you probably will need to make a twirl. I mean, I made this work in twirl, so that's why I'm able to make those adjustments to effectively get a better fit. And from experience, I usually make something between 2, 3 or 4 times before I get a better fit. So don't be disappointed, never be disappointed if your first garment doesn't always fit. And I'm finding now, because I'm working through my patterns more diligently and doing measurements, so I know whether something's not in the right place, I can make those adjustments before I actually start to cut out fabric. So the next stage is for us to prepare the pattern in readiness of it to be pattern matched and also pattern aligned. So the first piece is the front. So all I've done is I have put in the seam allowance in the front, because the top has a centre seam allowance. So I've put the seam allowance in, and I've also marked it green, so it's obvious that this is for pattern matching. I have also put in a huge hole here, and this is where the apex of my bust will sit. So I just have a little plastic template that I use to cut the area out in my bust to make sure that nothing like a flower, for instance, sits there when I cut it out and it's sitting prominently on the apex of my bust, because I don't want that either. So I've cut that out, and the way I have measured that is I have taken the measurement from the top of my neck and shoulder and measured down to my apex, and the measurement for me is 12 inches. Then I've measured from one apex to the other, so that's 8 inches. So I've divided that 8 by 2, which gives me 4, so that's the half measurement, and that is what I've done. So I've measured 12 inches, taking into account the seam allowance, 12 inches down and then 4 inches across from the seam allowance to give me this area, this general area of where my apex of my bust will sit. So when I place this on the fabric, I don't get something too visual that will sit on top of my bust. So that's why I have done that. So the other thing I have done is I have marked across the pattern. So this orange highlighter signifies the alignment. So, and I've just used the notches that are already in the pattern. So in the front, back and the sleeves, there is a notch line that effectively runs all the way across the front, across the sleeves and the back, and all I've done is highlight that line. So you can see here on the sleeves the notch mark is here, so I have run it horizontally across the sleeve, and we have our green highlighter pen on our sleeves as well, to the point where we finish on the sleeves before it goes into the ties. So that's the pattern matching marking. So green is for pattern matching and orange is for fabric alignment. Now we do have quite a few areas here which we can pattern match and also align, but if we don't have enough fabric, you have to decide which areas take priority. So obviously the first area that will take priority is your center seam line down the front of your garment. So as long as you can pattern match the front, everything else sort of is secondary. So if you have enough fabric to then do the back, if that's your next priority, or the sleeves, if that's your next priority, then you just work to those priorities to make sure that you get the garment that you want. Now, for me personally, I will always do the front and I will always do the sleeves next, and then if I have enough fabric I will do the back. So the next step is fabric selection. So this is where we go and find our fabric to make our top up. So depending on what size you have selected, you need to go and find how much fabric you need. Now I feel that it is near impossible to gauge how much fabric you need for pattern alignment, because you never know how big the pattern repeat will be from one piece of fabric to the next. So this is where you need to prioritize the importance of which pattern matching seam takes. So I will always pattern match the front of my garment before anything else. The fabric I have selected, I have quite a lot of it in my stash. I actually have 4 meters of this fabric and it is very narrow, so I know I will probably be able to get most of the pattern matching and alignment from this fabric, but I really won't know until I start moving my pattern pieces around. And when I cut or place my pattern pieces on my fabric, I will do it with the fabric laid singularly. It won't be folded over. So each piece will be strategically placed so I get a beautiful pattern match throughout my garment. So if it's just the front, then it's just the front. But I'd also like to incorporate the sleeves and the back. But for you, it just depends on how long or wide your fabric is. So just work on your priority pattern matching seam, which will be the front of your garment. The pattern actually gives us lots of different choices for our fabrics, and the one that I've opted for is silky types, and I've had this fabric in my stash since last July. I bought it from Stitch Fabrics and it was labelled up as silk, but it was too cheap to be silk, because when I looked at the composition it came out as 20% bamboo, 40% viscose and 40% polyester. But it's still beautiful. It's got beautiful drape to it. It's very vibrant and it is this. So the reason why I selected this is because it has a very small pattern repeat on it. So I know I'm going to be able to get this top out of this fabric, hopefully incorporating all of the pattern matching and alignment that I want to, and even have some of this left to use in something else. So I'm going to place this on the table, and then we're going to start moving our pattern pieces around. I'm going to show you what you need to do to those pattern pieces to make that pattern match work. So before we start laying the pattern pieces on the fabric, I thought we would just check out the pattern repeat. So I've laid the fabric nice and close to the camera, and you might be able to see it straight away. But what you do initially is you just go and find one point in the fabric to start with. So I'm going to start off with these flowers in Frida Kahlo's hair, and then you work across the fabric until you find that same point again. Once you've found that, then you will move down until you find that same point again, and this is where you then have your pattern repeat. And you can see it's nice and small, and it will work really well on this top. Even though this is a small repeat, I need to get balance in my garment, so I need to really figure out where that center seam is going to go. So just by quickly laying this front piece onto the fabric, I can see straight away that I will probably have to do my center seam through Frida's head going down, because otherwise I won't get a balance to the garment. Right, so before we actually start putting our pattern pieces on the fabric and playing with them to get a nice sort of fit, we need to look at the pattern pieces in a little bit more detail. Now I have got the front piece here, and I apologise now because there's going to be quite a bit of rustling in this section, but I've got my front panel here, and you can see I've made this adjustment here to lengthen the bodice, and that's a personal adjustment for me. So whatever garment you're making, make your adjustments first, because once they've all been done, you can then prepare your pattern for pattern matching. So this top has a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I have drawn the seam allowance in on the front center line, because that is where we want our pattern matching to go. So you only really need to draw in the seam allowances where you want your garment to be pattern matched. So on the front panel, we just have that center line down, and I've highlighted it green, so hopefully it's a little bit easier for you to see when it's on the fabric. As well as that pattern matching line, we also need to put a horizontal alignment line. Now this pattern came with a convenient notch already in the side seam, and I just used that and drew a line horizontally perpendicular to the front, and it's nice and square on at a right angle to the centre front. So and I have just followed that all the way around the garment. If your pattern does not have a notch, then just create your own measurement. So just for instance, measure 2.5, 3 inches from the side seam down. Make a note of that measurement. So if it's 2 inches, measure 2 inches down, and then just make a line across your pattern, and then just follow that on all the other pattern pieces. So because I'm cutting out the fabric singularly, what I've done is I've also cut out not just a right side but a left side. So I've got 2 pattern pieces because I'm going to cut these out singularly, and it does make it easier when you're moving your pattern pieces around the fabric to see exactly where they fit, and if they fit comfortably on the fabric when you're doing the pattern matching and alignment. And you can see straight away, if I just put these 2 pattern pieces close together, the 2 green lines will be the seam line down the front of this top, but also you can see where that horizontal, that orange highlighter line follows straight across the front of the top. So we have drawn that pattern matching seam line in, which is important, and on the back we have done exactly the same. So I have 2 back pieces, and you can see I have drawn in the seam allowance to the centre seam in the back, and I've also got my matching highlighted alignment line down around the back as well, so that line follows all the way around the front and the back of the garment. And not to leave the sleeves out, because the sleeve has a seam down the middle, I want to try and pattern match that as well. I have done exactly the same on the sleeve. So I've got 2 sleeve fronts and 2 sleeve backs. So that's how they will be sewn together. And you can see I've got my green pattern match line, and that horizontal line follows all the way around. And that is just measured on the seam line that effectively sits under the arm. So the seam line from the bodice goes around bodice, and it's the same length for the arm. So basically the alignment should follow across the arm and the front, though it's not necessary. But if you have the fabric, why not? Just, you know, play with it, have some fun, just take your time. Pattern matching is all about really looking at your fabric and just taking time. There's no rush. This part of the process is a little bit slower, because when you sew it up, that's when it all comes together and the magic happens. And I just can't wait for you to do it, because you will love it and you will be hooked. So now we've got all of our pattern pieces, we can then start placing them on the fabric. So I'm going to lay the fabric on my cutting table single fold. So and then I'm going to start positioning the pattern pieces. And the one thing I will need you to do before you start doing it is just prepare the green highlighted seam lines. So on the front here, you've got your green line. Just score down that seam line so that you can just fold it to the front. So really all you've got on this edge is the stitch line, so it's folded back on itself. Okay, and that will just help a little bit when you're having to look at the fabric underneath the pattern. So let's make a start. So here's the fabric laid on the cutting mat. It is singularly laid, so it's not been folded over. So this means that I can cut each pattern piece out singularly. And the most important pattern piece is the front. We need to get our centre stitch line correct, because that will then dictate the rest of the garment and how it's aligned and pattern matched throughout. So originally I decided that I really wanted Frida's head to be in the middle of my top, and if I fold back this stitch line here where the green highlighter pen, this is my stitch line, so I need to fold that back out of the way so I can see where this pattern piece falls on the fabric, and I can start finding my center line. So if I place my center line just gently on Frida's heads going down here, I can see straight away that the pattern overhangs the fabric. So this row of heads, or column of heads, sorry, is not going to work. So I need to then bring it forward to the next column of heads. So it obviously fits really well there. So what I'm going to do is just going to reposition the camera, and then I'm going to just lay the pattern piece down so it aligns nicely to the end of Frida's eyebrow. So that's the first thing you need to do. And the second thing is this alignment line. Now this is quite important, because this is what will allow you to position the fabric nicely around the rest of the garment. If you're not bothering to pattern match the rest of your garment, I wouldn't worry too much about the alignment line. You only will need it on this piece and the other front piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this alignment line, and I'm just going to align it to the bottom of Frida's top here, where you see red binding in effect around her own top. I'm just going to move that so it sits, so it would run straight across that binding. And the only reason why I've done that is because when this is stitched, it will be stitched nicely here, but also the seam allowance up here, there's 5/8 of an inch seam allowance here, and I don't want any, just a little blob of black at the top of this top. So I've just brought it down slightly so that there's just blue around that front part of the neck. Also, this area here where the apex is, there's nothing in there that will draw the eye to the bust. So I think I'm happy with the positioning. So all I need to do now is to pin it down. Don't worry about being too precise. Just get it pinned down. Because this top has a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you do have some flexibility when we come to actually stitching it. So I'm just going to literally bring the stitch line to the front of Frida's brow and just pin. And then on the next one, front of Frida's brow and pin. And front of Frida's brow again and pin. So that is all pinned down, so we've got a really nice line there where it's going to be pattern matched. It's also nicely lined at the top here, so we only get blue at the top here, and our alignment line comes just in line with her own red binding around her top. So remember that bit, because that's quite important when you come to match up the second part of this top. So once you've got those few pins in, you can go and then pin the rest of your top. So we've got our first piece pinned down. We're going to try and put our second piece in the same area. So you can see we've got our stitch line on Frida's brow there all the way down, and we've brought the seam allowance forward. So what we need to do with this second piece, we need to look for the same Frida head again. So Frida's head there is looking towards the wall, whereas Frida's head here is looking towards me. So that's not the correct head. The correct heads are these, which are facing the same way as this one. So this is where you get your continuity from. So just place your pattern on the same area as you did here. So on Frida's eyebrow, right at the point there and there, and just see whether it actually fits onto the fabric. And I can see move this, you can see it just is not fitting very well here. So I'm not going to use this piece on this bit of fabric. Right, so I'm going to move on to the next pattern piece, which is the back, because this will definitely fit onto the area that has been left, because we don't need to pattern match it to the front, because obviously the front and back are completely separate. The only thing we do need to do is we need to make sure that the front and the back are aligned to this orange highlighter pen, because it follows all the way around the garment. So generally what I do is I draw in this alignment line, and I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this. So I think what I might do to make it easy is I might just use some washi tape. Right, so first of all, you have your front pattern, and the alignment line runs down and across, and we have Frida's top here where we've aligned the front. So I'm just going to put my ruler there where we got the alignment. I'm going to align it up to the orange highlighter line there, and then you get this continuity through it. So I'm just going to literally put this on, and normally I would not do this if I was pattern matching myself. This is just so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Right, so that is the alignment line. So I have my back piece here, and I can actually use this column of Frida heads going down, and all I need to do is to align this line so it meets this line from the first pattern, so get that continuity around the whole of the garment. So first of all, fold over your seam allowance, position it very gently on Frida's brow. So I'm going to use her brows again for the back. So there, there and there. And then I have to bring this up slightly to match that alignment line there. And there. So that is it. So it has been matched beautifully, Frida's head, and aligned to the front. So that is the important bit for the front and the back to match. This bit is just for the back pattern matching. So once you're happy with that, you can then pin it into place. So just use Frida's brows. That's one. Two. Three. And then just go around and pin the rest of the pattern piece down. Right, so I'm going to start placing the next pattern piece. I'm going to do the second front. So Frida's head is here pointing towards the wall. So this is the right column of heads that we need to get a perfect pattern match. And I think what I will also do is I use the washi tape as well, so that we've got the alignment line in, so you can see exactly where it is. And the alignment line just falls below Frida's top, that red bit of her top, you remember. So if I just put washi tape there and there. So that is the alignment line. So normally I would put that in with chalk. So with our pattern piece, move it over to the top of that washi tape, and don't forget, with your seam allowance, fold it in towards the center of the pattern, because we need to have this stitch line exposed. So once you've got your stitch line exposed, you just get your pins and look for Carla's brow again. So this is the head pointing towards the wall with her brows and this alignment line. So position your alignment line on the washi tape and then look for Carla's brow. So there's the top of her brow there. And then once you've got that, you can pin that little bit of the front, and then move the pattern to hit the front of Carla's brow, coming down to the next head. And once you've got that, you can pin that. And then position the pattern again onto Carla's brow in exactly the same position as you did the other front. And then once you've got them all into place and your alignment is in place, you can then pin the rest of your pattern piece. Right, so that's that one done. So now we can move on to the second back piece. So I'm just going to move the fabric along. Right, so now we've finished the second front, we can now work on the second back piece. And what I've done is I put another piece of washi tape onto the fabric just to keep that alignment line going, which will help you visually see where I'm placing the pattern piece. So remember, the washi tape is on Frida's top, just under the red binding. So we've got our back pattern piece and we need to go and find the heads where they're looking towards me. So just position it gently to start with, and then use your alignment line. So I'm going to just push the seam allowance of the pattern back on itself so I can see the stitch line. And then this stitch line will come up to Frida's brow, and then I make sure that that alignment line is aligned with the washi tape and it continues through, so you can see that nice alignment throughout the whole of the front and the back now. So I have Frida's brow here, and I'm just going to pin that in place. And then I have Frida's brow here, and I'm just going to pin that in place. And then last of all, Frida's brow there, and pin that in place. So it's all beautifully matched and aligned. So once you're happy with that, go and pin the rest of it and just bring your seam allowance forward. So next we're going to have a look at the sleeve. So each sleeve is a two-part sleeve, and it has a center seam line, and this is our pattern matching seam here. So this is the left sleeve, so there's a front and a back to the left sleeve, and this is the right sleeve, and exactly the same, it has a front and a back. So because I'm also being a little bit pernickety, I really want to get Frida's head to sit in the middle of my sleeve. So I know that when I start placing the pattern pieces down, I need Frida's head to sit on this alignment line. So the best way also to get better use out of the fabric is to pick your pattern pieces so they go in the same direction. And this is what you would normally do with any pattern placement when you're laying it down on your fabric. You obviously want to get as much out of your fabric as you can. So for me, I think this will work better or best. So I have also, you can see, I put washi tape on the fabric, which indicates all the alignments places that I could use for the sleeve. So the washi tape is below Frida's top, and so I know I have lots of areas to move these sleeves. So if I work on the first sleeve to start with and try to place Frida's head just above that alignment line, I'm going to push the seam allowance back so it exposes the stitch line, and I'm going to start playing around with the pattern piece. So we've got a head here, so if I position the head there with that stitch line on Frida's brow, I can see I haven't got enough fabric at the end, so that's not going to work. There's a head here, so if I move up here and place the stitch line on Frida's brow with the alignment line on the washi tape, yet again I can see there's no fabric here, so that won't work. So what I will do is then I will move this down, so Frida's head's here, just above the alignment line, which is what I wanted. So, and then I can just move the pattern piece in to sit just on her brow, as I have done with all of the other pattern pieces, and that works. So I'm going to leave that there for the minute whilst I place the other one. Now, this pattern piece is obviously the right sleeve, that's the left sleeve, so they are not connected at all, so you treat them separately. So yet again I'm looking for a position for this pattern piece where Frida's head is above the line, and I think that one there will be perfect. So she alignment onto her brow, and then you can see how that fits quite nicely into that other sleeve and gives you better use of your fabric. So you can see straight away I've used two different alignment lines. They both work, and they also allow me to get more out of my fabric. Right, both pattern pieces have now been pinned, but before we move on, I just want to point out the fact that Frida's face on both of these sleeve patterns are facing towards me. So Frida's face is here pointing towards me, and Frida's face is here pointing towards me, but they will look different on each of the sleeves. So this is the left sleeve, so, and the front section. So when the other sleeve is aligned, her face here will be pointing towards the back of the sleeve, so they're pointing towards the back of the garment. But on this sleeve, even though Frida is pointing towards me, her face will actually point towards the front of the sleeve. So you can see that these two pattern pieces, once they're actually stitched up, Frida's face will be pointing in different directions, and you will see that come together when you actually start stitching the sleeves. But what you need to remember at this point, Frida's face at the moment is pointing towards me. So when we cut out the other two sleeve patterns, we have to make sure that we look for the face that's pointing towards me so that we align them up correctly. So hopefully that will become clear when we come to doing that next. Right, so we've moved the fabric down so that we can place the second part of each of the sleeves. And this time I've only put 2 strips of washi tape in, because I'm only interested in Frida's face that's pointing towards me, because that's what we need to align the sleeves up to. So I've got my first sleeve, and I'm going to find Frida's face, and I can see one already here. So just pull back your seam allowance again to expose that stitch line, and then using your highlighted alignment line, just place your pattern into place. So I know that this pattern piece will fit on there because there's enough fabric and it's aligned. So all I need to do is go and find Frida's eyebrow and just pin that down. So I will pin it all down in a moment, but I'm just going to place the second one. So the second piece, Frida's face again is looking towards me. It won't fit on this one because obviously the tie overlaps the other sleeve, so I need to move it right down, and I don't think there's enough fabric on the end, no. So the only place I can put this is to move this pattern piece down and use this second strip of washi tape. So to pull back the seam allowance to expose the stitch line, go and find Frida's eyebrow, align it to Frida's eyebrow, keeping this line also on that part of the washi tape. Perfect, and then pin that down. So yet again, 2 different alignment lines, pattern nicely placed. We do have quite a bit of spare fabric here, but I'm hoping to use what I have left of this fabric on another project. The last 2 sleeve pieces have now been pinned, so they're ready to be cut out. And the last 2 pattern pieces to finish off with are the facings. So we have the front facing, which needs to be cut on the fold, and 2 back facings. So there's plenty of spare fabric left, so I will go back and find some spare fabric to cut those out. Right, so I've got one of my facings cut and some interfacing, and I've used G710 because it's the finest woven interfacing, and it's just lovely and soft, and it will make the garment move, so there won't be any stiffness. I'm just going to place it on top. Okay. Right, so any overhang of interfacing, then I will just trim that off. Right, so that's all our interfacing done, and we are now ready to sew our top. So how much fabric did I actually use? Well, for a version C size 18, the pattern envelope recommends that for 115 centimetre wide fabric I needed 2 meters 30, and for 150 centimetre wide fabric I needed 1 meter 50. So I had 4 meters of 107 centimetre wide fabric. So my fabric was quite significantly narrower, but it was longer. So I knew that I would be able to get all of my pattern pieces cut out on that length of fabric. And you might have noticed that when I was laying the pattern pieces out, I was cutting as I was going along, and I only did that because I knew I had enough fabric to cut this pattern out. Now, I would highly recommend that when you start doing it yourself, first of all, place the pattern pieces down and make sure you can get all of your pattern pieces out of the length of fabric that you have. And then once you've moved them around and done what you need to do, go back and then spend time placing them precisely. Now, when I was cutting out all of these pieces, I did have quite a bit of fabric in between the lengths, but I knew I had enough. And that fabric won't go to waste. It will be used on things like bag lining, and I still had a meter left. So I used 3 meters. I still had a meter left at the end of it. So even though my fabric was narrow, I was quite pleased that I only needed an extra 70 centimeters, because for the 115 centimeter wide they said 2 meters 30, so mine was a little bit narrow, so I knew it would be, I'd use up a little bit more. But I was really pleased and surprised that I only needed an extra 70 centimetres. And that was taking into consideration also the extra length that I added to the bodice and the sleeve. So I'm really pleased with that. Now, when you come to doing your own, pattern placement and everything, you might have more flexibility in your fabric, because first of all, I'm a size 18, so my pattern pieces are wider. So I know that I'm going to have to move my pattern pieces around quite a lot, and probably will end up needing extra fabric. But if you're smaller than a size 18, and also if your fabric is wider, you have a lot more flexibility in your fabric to move your pattern pieces around. And you might be quite surprised at how you can, you know, majority of the time get your pattern pieces cut out with pattern matching, only using the length of fabric that's been recommended, but always check first of all before you start cutting. So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the content. There is a lot to absorb, and if you're anything like me, it takes a while for it to bed in. I hope I've explained it well enough for you to really understand how the pattern pieces are laid on the fabric and to get that sort of pattern matching seam and also the alignment within your fabric. Now, I use washi tape throughout the filming. I don't normally use washi tape when I'm pattern matching, but obviously because I'm filming from a distance, I just wanted to make sure that you could see all of those alignment lines. Normally when I'm pattern matching, I'm up close, I can see what I'm doing. So I hope that the washi tape helped. If you want to use washi tape yourself when you're pattern matching, I think it really helps you see where those lines are, and it doesn't damage the fabric. It comes off really well. Next week I'm going to be doing the sew along, so we're going to be bringing this top together and seeing how all of those lovely pattern match seams come together. And in advance of that sew along, if you are going to come along the journey with me and pattern match yourself, you'll need this. This stuff is invaluable for pattern matching, and this is how I pattern match. This is low tack, double-sided wash away tape. Now, I just buy this from Amazon. It's really cheap, and I'll put a link in the description. If you have this sort of stuff, Wonder tape, this is far too tacky, and also it's far too good for pattern matching. With the pattern matching I do, generally I will use the tape to help me align the two pieces of fabric, and then once it's aligned, I will pull that wash away tape away and dispose of it. It does not stay on the fabric. It doesn't even get near the washing machine, so it does not stay on the fabric. It will be disposed of. So hopefully I will see you all next week for the sew along. So if you have enjoyed the content, and give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, it would be lovely if you could, and I will see you all very soon. Take care.